Hello, everyone. Hello, how are we all? Thank you for joining me today, by the way, for another podcast. Today, I am going to be diving into the world of double standards of the swinger lifestyle. But first, before we get into that, I need to share with you. So, I had a glitch with my website this morning, and in order to check it and check it was working, I went onto a completely different browser, bloody Microsoft something that I never use. Everyone uses Chrome, right? So I went onto it and I loaded it up and I searched for myself online. I don't know if you've ever done this or if you've ever posted anything online or traceable. It's such a surreal experience. And because it's so surreal, I just wanted to share with you what it was like seeing it. And I just want to um, share my screen if I can. I'm not sure if I can. Let me see. Share screen. Can you? Yeah. So anyway, I typed in, where are we? Yes. So that's what I typed in. I typed in this kind of girl, and all of this stuff came up, and it was a little bit surreal and it was a little bit weird. Um, Interestingly, the website didn't come up first, and it was instead, "What does swing do to a marriage podcast?" Which is fine. And then all these, and then like all of these, and it was so weird seeing myself, and yeah, um, yeah, so bizarre. So bizarre. Um, but anyway, let's see what's on page two. Outdated stuff. I don't like that. But anyway, I just wanted to share it because it was a surreal moment. Let me get the video back up. Here we are. We are back to the point in hand, or shall I say, the content in hand. Let me get my notes up. So today we are, of course, talking all about double standard. You're like, Rosie, that was a complete waste of my time. So a few minutes of your life you're never going to get back, everyone. Um, so today we are talking all about double standards in the swinger lifestyle. This has been spurred on because recently, as you all know, I received a question, or I read a question, and I've received questions on this topic, kind of like unrealistic expectations of when people kind of start venturing into ethical non-monogamy and double standards and different ways people are received. And it kind of spurred me on to wanting to make this piece of content about double standards in the swing lifestyle. Also, it has been something which has been kind of niggling away at me for a number of years now, and I wanted to dive into it. So that's what I propose to do today. So what are double standards of the swinger lifestyle? For this podcast, we need to go back in time, everyone. Okay, we need to roll the clocks back a few years to when I was living and swinging in London, when a new form of swinger party came on the scene. Women only play parties in the form of a women's only club, aptly named Skirt Club. Now, instantly, I was intrigued and I looked a little bit closer at the events they offered, which appeared to be female only, female led events for women wanting to explore sexuality in a women only environment. All good so far. So, fast forward a few months later, and a friend of mine, who also happened to be a swinger club owner, asked me would I be interested in helping him out one night at his club. Skirt Club had hired his venue and he needed somebody to work on reception. I gladly obliged and I meted and greeted like a boss. But afterwards, I was left with this niggling thought that kept tapping away in my brain, sandwiched somewhere in between like my thoughts at the time, which were kind of like, there's a 2 minute delay on the Jubilee line. This is not acceptable. And I wonder if that 2 day out of date seasoning pasty will still be okay to eat in my fridge. So trapped between these two very pressing matters was the following. This thought process goes off at a tangent. Bear with me, okay? And I was kind of thinking, many of the women attending Skirt Club event were women in relationships. And I found this out because I not so slyly asked them, had they been to a swingers club before or were they part of the lifestyle? As I was kind of like, working on the reception and welcoming them in. And oh, is this your first time here? Have you ever been anywhere like this? Oh, let me show you around. And I found that many of them were not single, but were exploring the form of E&M in whatever capacity that was in an all women environment, presumably with the consent of their male partners. So a lot of them were saying, like, oh no, me and my husband, me and my boyfriend are in the lifestyle already, or we've been to a club before, or we've met up with people before. But this is what I'm currently kind of enjoying or exploring. So happy days, hurrah to Skirt Club, providing an environment where women could explore away from the male gaze. But if the shoe were on the other foot, how would this be received? Was this a huge double standard glaring at me right in front of me? I couldn't help but wonder how many men out there would also enjoy this type of gathering, and if they did, would they even be able to attend? Would their womenfolk allow them out to explore their sexuality on a Thursday night, or would it not be allowed or encouraged because two men going to town on each other is not seen as sexy in society? And also within relationships and within people's kind of views, let's be honest, people don't view male bisexuality as something to be, um, you know, lusted after. So, should the male partners of the women in attendance wish to converse about male sexuality and exploration with them, how would this be received? Would they get the green light or not? And whose fault is this? Is it the women in relationships? Or is it society who wouldn't kind of allow this? Is it men not speaking up about this? Or is it the fact that men don't view other women playing with their woman as a threat? Would a woman view their man playing with a man as a threat? I don't know. There's so many unanswered questions here. And in this episode, I want to dive deeper into double standards of the swinger lifestyle as I find this topic fascinating. I'll explore bisexuality, self expression, the costs of swinging, stamina and performance, promiscuity, and emotional involvement. And I'm going to share a little bit more my thoughts on women only events and why I think we need to look at things from a different perspective. So let's dive into it. First of all, swinging isn't equal for men and women. I wrote about this last week. I spoke about this last week. I'm going to revisit it. Whilst couple swapping with couples can go some way to ensuring that everybody gets to join in whatever capacity they feel comfortable with, swinging on the whole is not equal for men and women. I find that many aspects of the lifestyle, especially swinger dating sites, are flooded with single men or men in relationships, let's hope with the consent of their partners, hoping to meet women, and other men's wives or girlfriends are the focus of their attention. The ratio found within the lifestyle, especially on swinger websites, is, I believe, roughly 65% men to 35% women. Women pay less for tickets for events, they are granted memberships more easily, and they are viewed as sought after commodities. Men, on the other hand, are viewed with suspicion when using online sites, charge triple the entrance fee when visiting clubs, and if they are single, are generally cast aside by those running the show. So, why is this? Well, in a nutshell, ethical non-monogamy in any capacity appeals far more to men than it does to women, simply because of how we are designed. But before I launch into my next point about human nature, I also want to point out that because so many men are drawn in by the lifestyle, and because they find it so alluring, I think also it would be wrong, or it wouldn't be the right environment if swinger clubs simply opened their doors and said, I mean, some do, and said, okay, all men are welcome, all single guys are welcome, because they would literally get flooded with loads and loads of guys hoping to meet women, and the men in attendance would have a lousy experience. Any women there would probably have a lousy experience because they will probably feel hounded by men. So I think on one hand, yes, there is a double standard where men are not accepted and they're viewed with suspicion, and they're not really, seen as valuable members of the community like women are. But on the other hand, I think the clubs have to kind of put in steps and draw restrictions, because if not, it would literally be flooded with guys. So I think there's two ways of looking at it there. Does that make sense? I hope so. So let's talk a little bit about biology. Many men find it, and I'm going to try hard not to generalize here, but I will. Many men find it much easier than women to have sex without forming an emotional attachment, as they find it easier to separate love and sex than women do. So an environment that offers men the chance to have sex without having to get emotionally involved with women is always going to prove popular with the male species. Secondly, many men, being sperm givers, have the drive to pass on their genes more frequently, even if they aren't actively seeking out other women. Their instincts are more prevalent. So again, an environment that allows this is always going to be popular, regardless of whether the woman is looking to get impregnated or not. Now, although women will still get the niggling feeling to act upon their impulses, it is far less frequent than men because they simply have sex for different reasons. They're also a lot more cautious about who it is they get involved with. I've spoken about this before, I've written about it before, about the reasons swinging appeals to men and women and the different reasons that men and women have sex. So they're a lot more cautious about who they are going to get involved with, and men and women have different lists of criteria. Men are seen to be less choosy, as they have a different set of criteria. So for men, the desire to procreate more often and with different women is more potent, whereas for women, it still exists, but not as strongly. I hope that's made sense. So what are the double standards? Double standards in the swinger lifestyle refer to situations where different rules or expectations are applied to men and women, often leading to inequalities and sometimes conflicts. Here are some of the most common double standards observed in the swinger community. Let's kick it off with one of the big ones, bisexuality. Whilst bisexual swingers do exist in the lifestyle, many men are not openly bi. It is much the same as it is viewed in broader society, where female bisexuality is treated as desirable and male bisexuality is not embraced. Some clubs host bi nights and bi-friendly nights, but these are in fact few and far between. Whereas for women, it is almost a given when swinging that females are bisexual or bi-curious, and women having sex together, let's be honest, it's seen as erotic. It is assumed that if a club hosts a night for couples and single women, the women will be open to playing with both genders. This assumed bisexuality and assumed participation is not something that people associate with male swingers. And there has been so many occasions, and I myself have been part of this, when you're chatting to a couple or you're getting down to it and there's a few different people involved, and then a woman will kiss you because you're a woman. And it's fine. Like in the eyes of people there, and the eyes of kind of what's going on, and the opinion of what's going on, it's like it's fine because it's women. Now, for me personally, this raises more questions about consent, but this has happened to me, when you've been playing with somebody, someone's come up, maybe they've had a few drinks, maybe you've had a few drinks, and you've kissed somebody, or you've done something with somebody, and there hasn't really been that conversation. It's just been presumed that it's all okay because you're women. If men acted like this, they just wouldn't act like this. And even if they wanted to act like this, they'd probably get punched in the face or they get shamed. But this presumption that it's fine because it's women, or it doesn't mean as much because it's women, or it's just women, it is wrong. But it happens. But it's wrong. Whole other topic for me to dive into, I feel. Number 2, types of swinger events. Some for men. Some events cater for bisexual and gay men solely, but they are not marketed the same as the high-end luxury events like they are for their female counterparts. Would male-only play parties be peddled to us in the same way that female-only ones are? Probably not. Another type of event I want to talk about is swinger social events. There are now several female-only swinger social outfits, not necessarily for bi women. And although I understand that this type of social community might not appeal to men, would it even be encouraged? Probably not. For women, As I have said previously, female-only events are alive and kicking in the lifestyle. And whilst this is a great thing, I myself have been to female-only play parties. I often wonder whether men gathering for the same reasons would be accepted and encouraged. Uh, Acceptance of multiple partners. For men, men may be praised or admired for having multiple sexual partners, as this is often seen as a sign of virility or success. Whereas for women, women on the other hand may face judgment or be labeled negatively for the same behavior, being unfairly stigmatized for promiscuity. Not always, and it's not something which is really heard of that much, but I think sometimes, men having sex with X amount of women per night in a club, whereas women having sex with X amount of men per night in a club, I think to a wider audience, they would be viewed very differently. Initiating encounters. So for men, men are often expected and encouraged to take the lead in initiating sexual encounters or suggesting swinging activities, whereas for women, they may be discouraged from being overly forward or proactive, potentially seen as being aggressive or too forward with other people. And again, they could be viewed as being too sexually available. It is usually men who initiate encounters, and it is usually men who kind of take the lead and stuff. And at the minute, I'm getting a lot of messages from people saying, the man initially has took the lead and he's initially kind of been the one wanting to open things up, but it's not panned out how he kind of has envisioned. And it's the woman who's kind of not stepped over him, but stepped forward and is now taking the lead with things. So I think sometimes there is that flexibility there, but usually it is the man who is often expected and encouraged to take the lead. Jealousy and possessiveness. Now, for men expressing jealousy may be understood or even justified. And this is certainly something I myself have seen, with a focus on protecting their partner or seen as a show of masculinity. Whereas women who express jealousy might be criticized for being insecure or controlling, with less understanding for their feelings. This is something I encounter very frequently in my coaching clients, in that when jealousy is displayed, there's always one, men always have their reasons for displaying it, whereas when women do it, I've heard women labeled as all kind of things, hysterical, possessive, crazy, jealous, and whereas men, it's, oh, well, I'm just trying to keep you safe, or I'm just trying to make sure nobody talks to you, or I'm just trying to make sure these are the right people. And yeah, all the time. I hear this. So I think jealousy and possessiveness, there's a huge double standard with. So costs of swinger parties. So for men, single men can always expect to pay more. And at times, single guys are charged, somewhere between 130 to 150 pounds per ticket to a swingers event, which is quite a lot of money. Yes, there are events that charge less than this, but men can always be expected to have to pay more when swinging. Whereas for women get much more of a sweeter deal, and entry price for single women to swingers clubs is considerably less. I've seen events that are, £10 or less or free, and most nights, if not all, will always accommodate single women. So the entrance fee is usually minimal. Also, things like membership fees, sometimes single women don't have to pay, sometimes it's minimal. Sometimes guys have to pay a lot more, and also access to clubs as well. They open their arms for single women. Whereas for men, I've spoken about before, they have to jump through so many red hoops, or red tape, I should say. Jump through hoops. I'll just make up my own red hoops. Again, there is a reason for this, and again, swinger club party organizers, they do have to be conscious of who they're inviting. If they opened up their doors to everybody, then they would have 70% men and a few percentage of women, and it wouldn't be right. But then on the other hand, it's not always fair. But I understand why people charge so much for single men, because they want to make sure the men who are attending are serious about it. Is it right? Maybe not. Are there events which charge by ticket and not by gender? Yes, there are, because also there's people who don't necessarily align as one gender or identify as one gender, and they just want to be present in that space. So I think clubs have to be a little bit careful about their pricing and their gender pricing. But as a general rule, men, you're going to get screwed over, so get your wallets out. Sexual performance and satisfaction. Men's sexual performance and satisfaction is often prioritized. Not even going to make a comment about that. In life. When swinging, with more pressure on them to perform and to satisfy multiple partners. Now, although I just laughed about that, I do think it's unfair as well, because there is a lot of pressure. Men feel a lot of pressure to perform, to be rock hard, to be able to satisfy multiple partners, to be able to just like keep going time after time and be ready for different women. And again, this is a question I receive so frequently about sexual performance, whereas women are kind of, it's okay if you're more passive, it's okay if you just not be a pillow princess, but you're not expected to have to be ready to perform. Whereas for men, it is something which worries a lot of guys. Again, I think this does go back to the men being kind of like initiating the play or initiating the conversation, and women taking a more passive role. Again, this plays out when people start having sex and being intimate. Is it something which I think is a much more wider norm? Probably. But in a swinger club, women can essentially do as little or as much as they want, whereas men, yes, they can do as little or as much as they want, but I think sometimes men feel the need to kind of, be virile and be active and have stamina. And let's be honest, like not many people have that. So women's satisfaction and sexual needs might be given less attention, and their pleasure, it may be seen as secondary, or they may not have to perform like a man kind of feels he has to perform. I hope that makes sense. Rules and boundaries. Men might be given more leeway in breaking or bending upon agreed rules and boundaries when swinging within a relationship, whereas women, especially women in couples, are often expected to strictly adhere to rules and may face harsher consequences for any perceived breaches. Again, this is something which has come up time and time again with clients. Men are kind of like, a man will do something, he'll overstep the mark, he'll disrespect a boundary, he'll do something he wasn't really meant to do or they'd agreed wouldn't happen. But it's, oh, well, in the heat of the moment, I couldn't do this. And heat of the moment, oh, I was getting down to it. I didn't know, or it's not my fault, or, well, Whereas for women, they are expected, by a lot of men, they are expected to stick to the rules, follow the rules, not step out of line. Is this the same in relationships? I don't know. I don't feel like I can comment, but yeah, I have come across this a few times when working with couples. Emotional involvement. I've spoken about emotional involvement before. Men are often expected to be less emotionally involved and more focused on the physical aspects of swinging. I think this is more fair to say, to be honest. This is more realistic. Men can have sex with multiple people without getting emotionally involved with them, whereas for women, when we have sex, it's a much more of an emotional response. So women, they may form an emotional connection with somebody. They may want a bit more emotional involvement from somebody, but they could also be viewed as, this could be viewed suspiciously if they develop deep emotional connections with their partners. And they could at times face pressure to remain emotionally detached, which they may not find easy to do. They may really struggle with it. So again, I think there is a double standard there. And I think in order to understand that and to support one another when swinging, you have to understand that men and women have different levels of emotional involvement and what they need off other people. Again, not all men, but most men can quite happily have sex with people and not really care too much about who they are or what's going on. Not all men, but a lot of men. And this is not always a criticism. It's just how men are wind up. Privacy and discretion. I will try and get to all these. I have a lot of points. I've been writing a lot. Privacy and discretion. Men might feel entitled to privacy or discretion about their swinging activities, expecting their partners to keep things confidential. Men find it a lot easier to not talk about things with their friends and their family and their people who are close to them, whereas for women, we don't. And we may face pressure to be more open and transparent about our activities, both within relationships, sometimes with close friends, or relatives or people who who we are close to, and we may want to talk about it, and we may want to share our experiences or try and analyze our experiences and make sense of it, whereas for men, they found it a lot easier. And sometimes, if men want to talk about it, if men want to share, I think they should be able to. But again, I think sometimes it's not always seen as an acceptable thing to do, which again leads me on to going back to that point of the social side to it. And like women, we have swinger social groups that are purely for women to go out for a drink or out for a dinner, whatever, with 20, 30 with women and just talk about the lifestyle. Men don't have that. And I think the reason why men don't have it is because it doesn't necessarily appeal to men, but again, it's kind of not accepted. I can't imagine my own partner saying he was going out with all of his friends or all of, other men in the lifestyle to talk about lifestyle. Would I be happy with that? I'm not sure. Like, I probably would. But I think for women to go out and do that, it's more acceptable. And it's also kind of like, well, what's going to happen when she's with women? I don't know. Men and women view these things very differently. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But again, would it appeal to men? I don't know. Do they want that? Maybe. Would you go out with your menfolk and talk about the lifestyle? Maybe. Appearance and attractiveness. For men, there may be less emphasis on men's physical appearance and attractiveness, focusing more on their ability to attract and please partners. Whereas for women, often face greater pressure to maintain a certain level of physical attractiveness and might be judged harshly on their looks. I think attractiveness is a huge double standard in the lifestyle. Women are expected to present themselves in a certain way, be a certain way, look a certain way, dress a certain way, whereas guys can pretty much put on a shirt, put on some jeans, rock up, all is good. But then you also have to think, well, how much more can a guy do? They don't have as many options. If a guy just decided to wear a certain outfit, he may be criticized for that. He may be shamed for that. That again is a double standard. So again, talking about self-expression, women can pretty much express themselves however they feel, however it feels right for them. Whereas for a man, if he wants to do that, he could be shamed, he could be judged, he could be criticized. So again, men kind of fall into this category of shirts and jeans, and that's it. So yeah, I think there's more to say on appearance and attractiveness and self-expression. But it's really interesting when you think about it, because it's kind of like, well, men aren't really given the option to, and men who do want to dress a certain way, they are criticized or they are not taken seriously, I would say. So I'm going to try and wrap it up. I've really enjoyed this episode. I've had so much to dive into and so much to talk about. I do have a few more points to make, but I'm going to share those in the written piece of content, which will be coming out next week. What do you think about double standards of the lifestyle? Do you think my points were fair? Do you think they were accurate, or do you think maybe there's other reasons that there's double standards? Do you think there's other double standards that perhaps I haven't covered? I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your comments. So do please drop them below. Next week, let's talk about next week. Next week, I'm going to be doing a special live meet up over in CNM for us, but you can join it by simply clicking the link as you always do. I will be recording it, I will be sharing it, but really the live is to welcome in people who are part of CNM for us, and also talk about the site, and also hopefully have some members live on air to talk to, and also have some questions. So it's not really a structured podcast deep dive into something, it's more just a social meet up, and I'll talk about the site, talk about how it's going, talk about my thoughts, and talk about what people are loving and what they're perhaps not over on CNM for us, and let people know a little bit more about me as well, because I love talking about myself and the sound of my own voice. We all know this. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I've had a ball. And I shall see you all next week for my live, which is at the time of UK GMT 7 p.m.